A new card was spoiled earlier today called Workshop Warchief. It's a 5-mana warrior rhino who's got a big fucking golden spanner. It's a 5/3, it has Blitz for 6 mana. It's a trampling creature. When it enters the battlefield, gain 3 life, and when it dies, create a 4/4 green rhino warrior creature token. I'm going to talk very briefly, not too long. I'm not going to make a 13-minute video out of this like some YouTubers would. And I'm going to talk about how this is kind of like Thragtusk, but it's not. It's both worse and better in many ways. Yeah, interesting card. This video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com. If you're looking to pick up a sealed product or singles, then use the link in the description below to help support the show. Or you can support me on Patreon if you want to sling me some money and get access to these older sleeves. Workshop Warchief is in the long tradition of 5-mana rares or sometimes mythics that look like bombs in their standard environment. The most famous one of these that even slipped by the designers of the game was Thragtusk. During Thragtusk's Future League, where they look at the cards that are being printed and see where they will end up in future standard formats, Wolfhere's Silverheart was meant to be the big green 5-drop, and Thragtusk just shit all over it. For those of you who didn't play when Thragtusk was around, this thing was omnipresent in the format. Basically, a lot of standard became like, what do you do when your opponent casts a Thragtusk? Can you attack through a Thragtusk? How does Burn beat a Thragtusk? It's a 5/3 that when it entered the battlefield gained you 5 life. When it left the battlefield, it made you a 3/3. Part of the reason it was so good, well, there's 2 key things to think about here. One, it's 1 singular green pip, so it was splashable in all sorts of decks. I played my fair share of this in 3-color Abzan decks, or at the time they were called Junk Reanimator. We didn't have the word Abzan to describe them. And in that deck you also played Restoration Angel, which meant you could have this and then you could flicker it. Cast a Resto, you'd make a 3/3 when it leaves, and gain another 5 life when it enters. And against some decks in the format, you just won at that point. You've made 2 bodies, you've gained 10 life, your opponent's fucked. There have been many a person point out that if this was double green, it wouldn't have been as omnipresent as it was during its time in Standard, but this is almost like a relic of a bygone age. Magic was very powerful throughout this thing's time in Standard. So how does Workshop Warchief even compare to the Thragtusk? They're both 5 mana, they're both 5/3s, they both gain you life when they enter, and they both make a body when they die. Obviously Thragtusk is upon leaving, which meant you could flicker it, so you can't really abuse Workshop Warchief with a blink effect, although you still gain 3 life and save the body, of course. And it's important to note that although blinking a Thragtusk was very good, one of the reasons Thragtusk leaving a body behind was so good was that when someone wrathed the board, and this thing was in Standard during a period when Supreme Verdict existed, it meant you got yourself a 3/3. Workshop Warchief makes a 4/4 creature, a bigger creature. So it's not blinkable, but you can have it in play, you can be slapping your opponent about, and when it dies, you make a 4/4 body, meaning you've got insurance against a wrath from the opposing control deck. Of course, it being on death and not upon leaves does mean that exile effects will usurp or get around the fact that it going to the bin would make a body, and there's quite a few of those effects in Standard right now. So less life, bigger creature, it's got evasion, so it just can't be chumped every time. It's got trample, and for 5 power, that's not bad. So far, so very Thragtusk, but not blinkable. But the interesting part about all this is instead of flavor text about carrying 2 spears, we instead have a 6-mana activation of Blitz. If you haven't been following, Blitz is an effect on cards from the Riveteers, the Jund faction of New Capenna. If you cast this spell for its Blitz cost, it gains haste, and when this creature dies, draw a card. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So what you have here is for 1 more mana, you can give the Workshop Warchief haste, similar to what happens with the Shifting Ceratops, which means it can just be 5 damage to the face after your opponent's wrath and you untap. Beyond this though as well, when it gets sacrificed to its own Blitz effect, you still get the 4/4 Rhino afterwards. And further to that, Blitz allows you to draw a card when the creature dies. Not just sacrifices itself, but when it dies. So if you were to haste this in for 6 mana and it dies in combat, you still get to draw a card and make a 4/4. I believe the fact that this can replace itself and make a body and gain new life and attack hastily makes it actually a viable threat. Perhaps not in the older formats, but I could see this seeing some Standard play, honestly. A lot of people are disregarding because it's not blinkable and that it's, harder to cast at double green, that it won't see any play. But Thragtusk was one of the greatest creatures ever printed and still is. This may not get to those lofty heights, but I think this has got some legs. I'll finish off by saying I think this design is super interesting, and the fact that it is evocative of an older card that is very strong, but does a thing slightly different. I talked in a previous video about how Elder Gargaroth, although perhaps power crept, did bring a lot of interesting designs to the table where it's not just strictly better than every 5-drop out there, but it can compete. Is this a Thragtusk? Is this an Elder Gargaroth? I guess time will tell. But this card is pretty fucking cool. I'm also a big fan of rhinos in Magic. Hope the video was interesting and informative. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Is this the new Thragtusk? And don't forget to smash that like button and ring that fucking bell. I'll see you all soon. Ta-ta for now.